Welcome back to Digital Insecurity. Today we're going to focus on tZero, blockchain and security tokens all rolled into one. What I want to do is mention that this is going to be a two-part. This we'll call the first part, and then we're going to post a prequel after the fact. This is really wrapped into many different directions. We have Patrick Byrne, who was a CEO of Overstock, who stepped down about a year ago, and the saga runs deep as he gives a tale of involvement in the three-letter agencies, Russian dossier, and a cybersecurity CEO that used to work with him at Overstock, who was found deceased in her car in a small, quiet neighborhood in San Jose, after calling her mom and telling her that we are in the matrix. There's something odd about this, but I also want to tie in a connection with Milton Friedman, who in the 90s had this revelation about where we would be today. And it so happens that Patrick is directly connected with Milton. And to tie this all together with a bow, as we step through each of the concepts today, just think, what does this have to do with Nasara Gasara? Okay, so let's jump in today. This is Digital Insecurity, tZero, blockchain, security tokens. So I want to start here with, is 2021 the year of the security token? This is on Investopedia, and there's just a few concepts I want to bring up here. Blockchain is one of the fastest growing digital technologies in recent history, and its revolutionary decentralized model is being appropriated by industries far and wide. And so from blockchain, we get into ICOs, or initial coin offerings, which we're all familiar with. And from there, we jump into the topic of security over cryptocurrencies. So where did this really come from? As with many other cryptocurrency launches, we read here on Investopedia, Overstock introduced its cryptocurrency called tZero via an ICO, initial coin offering. The ICO launched on December 18th of 2017. Let's remember that date of 2017, and was immediately met with significant levels of interest. Many ICOs are used to secure crucial funding for the continuous development of a project. As we quickly move forward, security token trading platform tZero has been awarded a patent for a way of recording trading data on public blockchains. The company, a subsidiary of retail giant Overstock, which I believe later spun out altogether, announced Tuesday that the patent for its new tech dubbed time-ordered Merkle epoch, TOME, methodology had been awarded by the US Patent and Trade Office. And again, this was announced in August of 2019 for that award. So let's zip forward here. tZero is a distributed ledger platform and also a cryptocurrency, two different concepts of the same name. And it launched by the internet retail company Overstock. It was developed to give greater legitimacy and oversight to ICOs and to allow companies to create and issue tokenized assets for investors. So there's our intro. My name is Barbara, and Diane is joining us today to go a little bit more in depth about tZero, what it is, what the implications are, and what we have up to date. Diane, do you want to jump in with this?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. I think, I just really wanted to talk about the excitement of the blockchain and what, what I feel is coming down the pike, which a lot of people may or may not know about. And, when I can kind of see this stuff in the background, I just feel like I want to share it so folks can put two and two together, or just start to figure out, how they want to go after whatever business opportunities that they want to, but also with an eye towards, how to think about the digital insecurities around, how fast we're moving, right? I always thought that the blockchain would definitely come after the cloud era. And, as I went around to various different conferences, and I would go to blockchain conferences for many years in the past and watch them in their early presences, trying to, people thinking different about their new applications, getting ready for this phase, but not really being able to do anything yet, until we knew that we had regulation, or until, they really had things dialed in for themselves. And so long story short, what's so exciting right now is that, I've been in conversations and Security Token Summit conversations, with big players like IBM, and I get to hear some of these discussions about how the SEC is talking together with folks, that are senators, even that are putting frameworks together in the blockchain to basically, you know, um, make the big reveal one day. So I feel like, regulation is coming, and with this, come the discovery of this particular company that you're talking about today, which is tZero. And from my research of this company, they have, as you mentioned, gotten the first patent to basically secure the first security exchange, right? They've worked with the SEC to establish this, and they feel like they're way ahead of many other competitors that could potentially come out later. I thought it was interesting. It was that Patrick Byrne, speaks. He's an investor. He was, I guess, the founder of Overstock, and is the one that's creating this platform for folks to do stock trading, and even, I think, is enticing the National Stock Exchange to sort of convert over, which in the past I always felt like, there was this kind of not wanting to let, the stock traders of the National Stock Exchange to really be a part of this. I think in the past there was always this like working and leaving folks out, and making folks feel like they're being left behind, and until they could really grip it. And now I think with, the onset of COVID, it's just making us have to think about how we embrace technology, digital technologies going forward, and how we're going to solve a lot of problems, right? In money laundering, how we're going to bring businesses back up, how we're going to bring economies back up, and how we can help governments as well too. And so I think there's a lot of embracing around that. And with that, comes the excitement. I think the big thing that Patrick talks about is, the big $915 billion prize that everybody's going to be after when embracing this technology. That's sort of the carrot for everyone, is to, make a lot of money. And but they're doing it right. They're trying to, they secure those patents, and I think they're getting ready for, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ravencoin to, and they're getting ready for the various different markets that could come on. He was an investor that basically had the forethought about technology, and how he would buy companies, right? And already envision how they would come into play very importantly around the blockchain in areas of supply chain, or in areas of voting and finance and real estate. And I think because, the blockchain has this connotation for being very, immutable, if you will, and being able to store the information from one block to the next, and not being able to change it, and being able to, see what the history is. So, it can solve a lot of problems in terms of fraud, in terms of money laundering, in terms of just keeping track of smart contracts and real estate, or, voting, making sure that, those votes are, not messed with. And so this is very exciting, because it's going to open up new opportunities in almost every area that you can think of. And just like, when we moved to the mobile era and had to redevelop, all kinds of applications for mobile, we'll be doing the same thing. And the opportunities are endless for what will happen in the blockchain. And, it just tells me that they're gearing up. I am also aware that, even prior to discovering this gentleman and really his back history, I had already seen companies like AWS building their proprietary blockchain platforms, and companies like Intuit that was also developing their open source flavor of blockchain, and we're going to move forward with it. And so, it remains to be seen whether those companies still continue to go forward with that. I think what we're going to see is lots of regulation going to come through as to how people are going to work, and there are different flavors of blockchain. But it's certainly solving a lot of problems, and or keeping track of supply chain histories, and is very efficient. And, I think it's going to be really exciting how it brings forth new innovative applications. And I think the one thing that we need to think about as all of this starts to roll for us is the fact that, there are digital insecurities, right? Everything might be immutable in its most vanilla form. But once you start putting something and adding things into your environments and putting things around it, it's so easy to set up a lot of misconfigurations. It's easy to get things wrong. And you'll always want to make sure that, that you're closing up the holes in and around, what it is that you're putting together in your environments. And so it's always good to have, folks penetration testing out the security of all these things, that they can go horizontally and do some horizontal testing, business logic testing, things that, really require manual assistance. And so really, that's the highlight of really what I wanted to emphasize for folks when it comes to digital insecurities or misnomers that people might be thinking that, this technology is secure. It may be, like I said, in its most vanilla form, but once you start adding more components in and around it, you do have to be conscientious of the potential digital insecurities. So just be smart about how you test for these applications as you bring them into your environments. But yeah.
That's interesting. Now, what was the dollar amount that you mentioned that's on the table here?
$915 billion is what he said is the prize. They got approval from FINRA. So they're really going to take off in great financial ways. I just feel like this is very exciting stuff. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a frenzy in the marketplace of people trying to, serve the blockchain market and start to come up on this. What's interesting is, I think there's a lot of people still trying to figure out the one-on-ones of it, and trying to figure out their digital wallets and how they secure them, and how they hire lawyers to, do trusts around their assets and secure them. I think, it's really important that people know that, once a hacker hacks your wallet and puts his name on it, that's his money. And so we can't, it concerns me to embrace this technology that's just running 100 miles an hour without allowing the security folks to catch up with them and lock them down, or get some security things right for them. I think, that's why I'm excited for this industry to grow and do what they can to get ahead of it before the hackers do.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned a few core topics there that I've kind of picked out. Of course, the digital wallet security is just of utmost importance here, but you also mentioned money laundering, and money laundering is certainly not just on the dark web, but when we're talking about 401ks being tied to the stock market, there's an immense amount of white collar money laundering going on as well. And the hope is that running in a system like this, there'll be more security and more transparency on the front end with the security of the digital wallets on the back end. Do you have any insight into or comments on that? The movement of money?
Well, I think it's supposed to capture it. That's the whole point, is, it's supposed to capture the movement from, one institution to another and where it goes. And so it'll start to give people that transparency. And that's the immutable part. Like, you can't change that in the block, from one to another, once, something really happens. And so, that part I think will remain solid, but it's the securities around the application, that just kind of need to be looked at. And so I think from within the blockchain or the general ledger application, um, these are probably, as pretty sound as they're going to be. Somebody had to have, looked at that, and I really don't have any insight into that
Hmm.
in particular. But know that the gentleman that created this it does worry me that maybe he is the sole person that has, the code and all of the rights around that. That does concern me, but hopefully there will be a sharing of information that makes it such that, or that the SEC will ensure that there isn't that one single person that has full control over how to do and undo things in the blockchain if they needed to kind of work within that and figure some things out. But I think that's the whole point, is you don't want to undo. So what can I say there? That's something that's just, I'm not privy to,
You're
the
right.
knowledge on
You're
that.
right. And
Yeah.
we saw that way back when the beginning of Bitcoin was coming out. And what was that, Mount Ox? And and through, with not an explanation that's really come out yet, somehow it was removed from that platform and moved somewhere else. And so there was a lot of question around who really owns it and how secure it is when it can be grabbed and moved. And then of course, Bitcoin since that point has run off in a whole direction on its own. But there's been question around the security of in this case, the trading platform that was initially used. And we've come a long way since then, and a lot of lessons have been learned. Now, you also mentioned that a lot of the different companies and or platforms are really rushing to find their own solutions. So of course, you mentioned Intuit as a company, and then AWS as a cloud solution absolutely has to corner the market in a security solution here. Do you have any known advances with AWS in this direction?
Um, do I have any known advances? Yeah, I mean, one example is, I think, was it Nestle? They own some of the coffee companies, and using the blockchain, AWS is one example. They were able to track, the coffee from where it got picked to where it got, cleaned and distributed, and use QR codes for purposes of, keeping track of the supply and where things are going when, so that if there is, any type of issue with regard to that supply and those coffee beans become a concern for the public, that they can trace it back. And so that was one really interesting case study that I remember learning about.
Now that
And
one
if,
wasn't even on my radar. I mean, come on, Nestle's a candy company, and of course they're into coffee as well. But then all the way to need a digital security solution wasn't even on my radar.
yeah, so if you think about just that example, right, and then how many other supply chains, things that can be managed, effectively, from car parts to anything, right, that comes to us in those big Maersk containers, anything, it really can get really interesting to use this technology to really service us in the future. I mean, I'm excited about it, and I'm excited that the government is having another eye towards it. I think it's really just going to be where we have to go. And other countries are embracing blockchain. It, China is, Dubai is. It's just like, if we don't keep up, we're going to fall behind, and that's just the bottom line. Um, yeah. So I mean, that's the exciting stuff.
Amazing. So I wanted to continue here, and thank you so much for that insight. So security tokens, one of the conversations that we had before we went live was how Wall Street and blockchain will kind of intermingle together. And I pulled up an article on that, but before we dig into that, I also wanted to point out that while you were giving your in-depth overview, I have the tZero.com site up on the screen, and exactly as you mentioned, Bitcoin Ethereum, and Ravencoin were the first allowed to trade on this site. Now, as we can see on the screen, Litecoin and some others have been added, but I did want to call your attention down to the bottom right. The US dollar coin is also on the platform, and I think that's very, very interesting that it is launching at all. So let's go back here. First of all, we've got security tokens and how Wall Street and blockchain will work together. Let me just pull that up. This article was on Medium, and this was dated 2018. And so if anybody wants to look more into this, do you have any comments specifically on an overlap or how these two worlds will end up colliding?
It could be very well that they might merge from one to the other, and not coexist. And I think that remains to be seen. It used to be that, banks would not want to cannibalize themselves. So they weren't really adopting the blockchain in the beginning, because it would be cannibalizing their business model. But now I find that, and they would always adopt the general ledger type of applications to do other things with the blockchain, but not the cryptocurrency stuff, because that was in their space. And so now what I think is happening is, they have to figure out how to be innovative and move forward. If they don't, the competitors are going to do it. And so, when I would go to conferences, I would see various different banks on the same panels talking about, and they would be blockchain executives or strategists, but they really couldn't speak to what they were doing in those conferences because they didn't want, BNP Paribas to hear, what B of A was doing in that space, even though they were sitting next to each other. They had to really be protective, and because they're competitors and they want to be first to market with, interesting things. And so, so I know these banks, have been on the back end looking at interesting innovations for some time. And so you can be sure that, in due time, they'll probably be ready to release it. I think somewhere I did learn, I think that Fidelity was tapping into blockchain as well too. And so, I mean, that gives you an idea for what, goes on there, right? And what's being spoken about. But these are all things that I just would hear at conferences. And, but I think it remains to be seen, when they actually start to come forward with, their real releases once, regulation is there, and start to do things in cryptocurrency ways. Right now, it's more general ledger stuff and applications on the general ledger that they might do that keeps track of things in the block, but not necessarily do the cryptocurrency stuff. So they've always been open to that and not the cryptocurrency stuff. But I think we're going to see stuff change here. When you start to put this whole picture together, looking at, US, approving a coin right here, and that with my insight of how I know, the data mines are going up in various different locations across the United States. And even though the regulation isn't there, the infrastructure is being set for blockchain. And so, it's just a matter of time. And then, it's coming.
Yeah, so tZero is definitely a FinTech solution that we'll keep an eye on. And thank you very much for the insight there. I wanted to kind of jaunt a little further here. When we were talking about this, you also talked about, in one of the articles, it brought up the CEO of Nasdaq, and it was a gentleman's name. And you said, wow, I think it's a woman. So we did a little bit of research and pulled this up. And remember, I mentioned when we started this off, that in 2017, this came to be. And as we're looking at this, we have Adina Friedman, who came in to be the Nasdaq CEO in 2017, apparently. And my comment to you was, wait, Friedman, could she be related to Milton Friedman? And as I quickly grabbed that together, I don't have an answer to that, but I know that there's got to be a connection here. And the reason I say that is I am also aware from my own digging that Patrick Byrne, who again, the founder and CEO of Overstock and the individual behind the tech for tZero, was a close friend of Milton Friedman, so much so when unfortunately Milton passed, rather than his own relatives managing his estate and his accounts, Patrick Byrne was tagged the individual responsible, and he served in that role for many years. And so he was very trusted and a very close confidant of Milton. And so I find it very interesting that in 2017, when he gets his patent, the other CEO of the Nasdaq, it transitions to Adina Friedman. Don't know the depth of the connection, but as we're connecting the dots, there may or may not be something there. But as I dug a little bit deeper, I'm going to kind of round this out here, because on CoinDesk, there's an interesting comment here. It says how economist Milton Friedman predicted Bitcoin. And as I look into this, this was by Daniel Kari. This was March from 2014. So this was even before that 2017 patent. Bitcoin and its crypto cash counterparts are essentially trustless monetary systems that upend the banking establishment's ideals of how a financial system should operate. Isn't that interesting that in 2014, they used the word trustless there? But they also mentioned here that intriguingly, the concept of digital money was predicted as far back as the late 1990s, and this was predicted by Milton Friedman. So as we're connecting the dots and putting the players together, there seems to be a tieback. So Diane, thank you so much for stepping in on this FinTech solution and giving us a little more insight. Are there any other comments you'd like to put on the table?
Not really. It's just all interesting stuff. I'm looking just as much as anybody else to kind of see where things are going. And, it's all about just, it's hard to stay in step with everything, but, with each year and each conference, you learn a little bit more. And folks, this is really uncharted territory right now for a lot of folks without a lot of, stuff put together. It's really a market of people educating themselves if they want to play in this market. So, there's a lot of risk. Make sure you, put security first. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned in the opening, I had a question out there. My question was, is there a tie-in here to Nasara Gasara? And so we're all familiar with what that is, but I'm going to go ahead and read this for those who may not be up to date on where we're at with this. Nasara Gasara, the National Global Economic Security and Reformation Act, NASARA, is, and that would be in the United States, GASARA's globally, is the most groundbreaking reformation to sweep not only the United States of America, but the entire planet, thus GASARA, in its entire history. The act does away with the Federal Reserve Bank, the IRS, and the shadow government, and much more. So as we're transitioning through Nasara Gasara into a more stable system, this topic today within the FinTech is very timely to understand a little bit more about a possibility of our next step as we look for financial security. So this has been Digital Insecurity, our review of tZero blockchain security tokens. Over and out.
Thank you.